It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind, and it either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Dio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas. Wishing you peace, warmth, and a little bit of wonder this holiday season. May your days be filled with good stories, good company, and moments that stay with you. I wanted to share with you some memorable interviews from 2025. The very first one that came to mind was Andy, who is a retired NYPD police officer. He moved to Pennsylvania and went fishing late one night. As he approached the dock, he saw what he thought was a bear. And he says, "I saw it from behind, and it was bent over with its arms in the water. This thing was making strange sounds, like it was talking to itself." If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Andy later said, "I never believed in Bigfoot until I saw it."
I'm originally from New York City. I moved out here about just about 5 years now. I really like it out here. It's quiet. I like the nature. I wanted to get out of New York. But I never thought that these things were real. In New York City, the most you see out there are raccoons, maybe once in a while at nighttime, or a rat or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard New York has some pretty big rats.
Oh, yeah. Rats and dogs and things like that. And occasional homeless people you see, but this was something totally different.
Well, if you would, take me back 2 years ago, kind of start from the beginning. What were you doing and what happened? What did you end up seeing?
Okay, well, about 2 years ago, I live in a part of Pennsylvania called Kingston. And the Susquehanna River separates Kingston and Wilkes-Barre. And the Susquehanna always had good fishing. And about 2 years ago, a guy caught a record-sized catfish. And he was in the news, and he explained that he'd go out in the nighttime and shine light and caught a nice big-sized catfish. And when I was in New York, I enjoyed fishing. So I picked up my fishing license, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go out there early, very early, like Sunday night going into the morning time. I went out about 3 o'clock, and to get over to the Wilkes-Barre side, you have to cross the bridge, and there's a college community up on the side, and there's steps that you can walk down going to where the Susquehanna is at, where you can fish. So I parked my car, got all my gear together, and I go up on the steps. As I'm walking up the steps to go down to where the fishing area is at, I hear like mumbling, like mumbling and grunting, and I'm thinking maybe somebody's already down there fishing. You know, I purposely picked Sunday because out here it's kind of old-fashioned. People sleep late on Sunday. Nobody would be out there. I thought I'd be by myself. When I went over and I started going down the concrete steps, and I looked down, they have lights that's all along. I don't know if you would call it a pier, or it's like a park area and there's woods and then there's a river. And the lights is not directly there, but you can see. What I thought I saw was a bear bent over. And right away I'm thinking, were there any cubs around where, you know, I don't want to get attacked by a bear? But this bear was like grunting and mumbling. It would, how to explain it? It was like he was talking to somebody. Like he would make noises like blah 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 blah, and then it would snort and grunt and pull back, like he was pulling something out of the water. So I stayed quiet and I watched it. And as I'm watching it, just then the light that was above me on the steps clicks on. And that's when this thing stood up, turned its torso, and looked at me. And I'm looking at it, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. This is not a bear. I dropped the fishing rod, and I remember I dropped the rod, and I stepped on it because I didn't want it to roll down the stairs to where it was at. It looked at the rod and then looked back up at me, and it did like showed its teeth, like you ever see how the chimpanzees show their teeth? Like, you ever seen that show BJ and the Bear?
No, I don't think I've seen that one.
BJ McKay, he was a trucker and he had a pet chimpanzee. It was called BJ and the Bear. It used to come on when I was little. And every time he would say something, it would like smile at him and show his teeth. Like, you know how the chimpanzees do?
Yeah.
It did something like that. It had like these square teeth. I didn't see canines or nothing. And it looked at my fishing pole, looked at, then it raises its arm. And it has like this long hair. It's dripping wet. And it raises its arm and it pulls up a catfish. It was about maybe, I don't know, a foot and a half long. And it starts swaying back and forth. And I'm looking at it and I'm still, my mind is like, what the hell is that? And it had big round eyes, very muscular. The fur or the hair or whatever you want to call it, was, because it was wet, it was clinging to his body, but you could see the muscles, like, the thigh muscles and the shoulder muscles. Very skinny waist. And I went down slowly to pick up my fishing rod, but I'm keeping my eyes on it, and it's swaying back and forth, and it starts swinging the fish in the water. And when I couldn't, because I'm watching it, I couldn't see where the rod was at. I looked down to pick up the rod. When I look back up, it's going underneath the bank of where the river is, like crawling underneath there somewhere. And that's when I grabbed my rod and I went back to the car and I sat down and I'm like, what did I just see? And it's been bothering me ever since. But that was pretty much the whole experience. But I wasn't that far away from it. I was maybe 15 feet.
15 feet's pretty close, man. It's really close to one of these things. When the creature made its exit, What did it do? It crawled underneath the bank?
Have you ever been by like the bank of a river and it's like you can go underneath the bank? It looked like it did that. It looked like it crawled. I don't know if it has a cave up under there or it dug out a hole or something, but it crawled up under there. And I turned around and I went back over and I went to my car and I was like, what did I just see? I know it wasn't a homeless person. It looked like it looked like you never see like a person that has like mental issues, like a mental retarded person. It looked like somebody like that had sex with an orangutan. It had that type of look in the face, very wide mouth, but the eyes had that type of, how trying to think of like people with Down syndrome. You know how all the Down syndrome people look alike, no matter what race they are, they have that type of look. It had that type of look around the eyes.
Yeah, I've heard that from other eyewitnesses as well. When they talk about it, they'll say it kind of has that look. And I've wondered over the years if it's something with the eyes, because, other people describe the eyes as being kind of sunken. So when you walk up on this thing and you're watching it, are you at an elevated position?
Right. I'm looking down at it. You have to go down the stairs to get to the where the river's at, where you can stand on I don't know what you would call it, I guess right on the bank of the river and fish. So I'm looking down at it, and when the light came on overhead of me, for some reason that light wasn't on, it clicked on. I dropped a pole, it heard the pole, and it turned around like greased lightning. Its whole body, not its head. That is like the top half of his body turned and legs turned around, like 1, 2, and it just looked at me. Then it looked at the stuff in my hands and looked at the pole and raised its arm like to show me the fish. I don't know if that's what it was doing. Raised its arm, and then I could see the hair hanging from the arm. It was dripping water off, and it held the fish. Then it started swaying back and forth, swaying and slapping the fish in the water. Like if to say, look what I got, don't come down here, or something like that. You're not getting this fish. That's the impression I got. I don't know if that's what it was doing, but it was swaying back and forth. And it showed me his teeth. I don't know what that means in the primate world. I know if a dog shows you his teeth, he's going to bite you. And something told me to freeze, like don't move. Because I've been around other type of animals, and I didn't want this thing to set off you run and it starts to go after you. It starts like a what do you call it? Like a prey drive or something. So, I just froze. And when I slowly went down to pick up the rod, and I was so busy looking at it, I didn't see where I was reaching. I looked down for 2 seconds. 2 seconds to grab the rod. I looked up. I saw the back of it going up under the bank of the river. That's how fast it moved. It was 2 seconds.
Yeah, when non-human primates smile at you and show you their teeth, it's not a good sign. I think we're actually the only primate that shows its teeth and smiles, and it doesn't mean I'm going to kill you. I was curious about the swaying. Was it swaying from side to side?
Yeah, it's swaying from side, just like the chimps do when I don't know if you watch these National Geographic things, and they grab something and they're swaying and they're swinging it. And that's what he was doing. He was making the grunt and snort noises and something like something like that. And every once in a while, I'll go and do that. That was pretty much the whole thing. Is that the color was a tannish color, but the skin was like I wouldn't call it a gray, like a slate, maybe a slate color, a light gray. Kind of leathery looking. I saw the skin on the face. Then the rest was hair, and then you could see the belly skin, and the rest was standing in the water.
Yeah, my opinion is when they're swaying like that from side to side, I think they're nervous. This is my opinion, of course, but you'll see it in gorilla behavior. They'll often rock themselves if they're stressed, or anxious, and even we do that. We'll humans will, and as being primates, we will rock ourselves too as kind of a comforting behavior. But I kind of think when these things do that, they're swaying from side to side. I almost think it's like a nervous reaction. You did a pretty good job at describing it, but when you were looking into the face, what other details kind of stay with you today, even beyond the face? What kind of details stay with you today? And did it remind you of a human?
The eyes didn't look human. The eyes were like big round eyes. I didn't see any whites, like big round black eyes. As far as human, the only thing I could say is that Down syndrome thing. It sticks in my head. And the mouth was really wide. Like there was the eyes, the nose, and the mouth went from cheek to cheek. And when it smiled, it had square teeth. Smiled or showed me his teeth. They were square teeth. It looked like I said, a Down syndrome person had sex with an orangutan. That's just what it looked like. When I dropped the rod and reel, it looked down at it. It was watching me, and then it saw it. It's like it followed it fall. It looked down at it, then it looked back up at me. I looked down at it, and my rod was going to fall down the stairs. I didn't want it to go near it. I didn't want to threaten this thing in any way. I stepped on it, and I reached down to pick it up, and it watched me, and then it started swaying like, I don't know what it thought the rod was. Did it thought I was going to try to hit him with it? I don't know. And it starts splashing the fish in the water. I look down to grab the rod. When I look up, it was almost gone.
I know your background is from New York and you're former NYPD, and cops, especially in New York, are very no nonsense, and I get that, but you're having this encounter now. You're in Pennsylvania, and you're seeing this thing. Before any of this happened to you, what was kind of your take on the whole subject of Sasquatch? What was your feelings about the subject?
It's funny. When I first moved out here about 5 years ago, I saw these guys in these cars, and they were like, if you've seen a Sasquatch, contact us. And they had the numbers on the cars. I laughed at it. I didn't, what are these guys talking about? But I would always see them drive around, Sasquatch hunters, our number is such and such. If you've seen a Sasquatch, and blah, blah, blah. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't, I always thought it was a joke. I always thought it was somebody dressed up in a suit, trying to do things for YouTube, but then after this, I've been doing research upon research. I've listened to your show, YouTube videos. On my lunch break, I go on the thing, and I just trying to make sense of it. And then I find out that these things are all over the world. People have seen these things. But I saw one with my own two eyes, so I know they're real.
Let me ask you, you went from not really believing in this and not really putting too much thought into it, and kind of maybe thinking it was a little nonsense, and that's okay. I mean, I think the overall idea of Sasquatch does sound ridiculous until you run into one. But how did this kind of affect you afterwards?
It changed my life. When I retired from the police department in New York. When I came up here, I bought a 2-family home, and the home needed some work, and I would do a DoorDash job. And the best time to DoorDash out here is the nighttime, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights. People order all the time, you make a nice bit of money. I couldn't go out at nighttime anymore. There's a place called Mountaintop where it's pretty much like country. And the people order. I'm in the city part, and you drive up there and they pay you a big tip to bring the food. But it's all trees. There's no lights up there. There's no anything. And one night I went, and this guy had a cabin, and he says, well, leave the water on the porch. And as I get out the car, I got that feeling like something's watching me. I got the same feeling is when I stared in the eyes of this thing. I'm looking around. It's pitch black. I can't see anything. I put the order on his porch and I ran to the car. As I'm driving, I'm looking at all the trees from side to side. Outside, it's like I'm a nervous wreck. I don't go out at night. I stopped doing the DoorDash job. I got a job with the hospital police in the Geisinger Hospital up here. And I work from 7 to 3. I get home, I come inside, I put spotlights in my yard. I have a couple of dogs. I won't let them out until I make noise and put the lights on if anything's back there. I've even had a couple of dreams about it. Like it's like your brain is trying to figure out something that's not supposed to be real.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. And I was curious if you had dreamed about it. I think it's a pretty common thing. I mean, even after my encounter, I dreamed about it for months. And I think maybe it is a way of the brain, kind of our subconscious trying to heal or trying to maybe deal with what we've seen. I always say fishermen get the brunt of the aggressive behavior. You technically weren't fishing. You walked up on one that was actually trying to get food. And you would think that would be very dangerous. A lot of times with these things, when it comes to hunters, they're aggressive, but not quite like the way they are with fishermen. And I kind of think it's because of the gun. I even had a eyewitness on the show one time. He had a walking stick and he had kind of pointed it towards them like you would a gun. And they reacted like it was a gun. And it makes me wonder, in this situation, you drop your rod and reel, and then you're reaching down to pick it up. I almost wonder if it was thinking that's a weapon, and then it kind of quickly exited. I mean, why do you think it quickly exited and just tried to get out of there? Obviously, you weren't a match for it.
I think that's what it was. And it's the funny thing? I don't go out anywhere. This is a concealed carry state. I don't go anywhere without my 9mm on my hip. I had it that day and didn't even think about using it. I had it right on my side the whole time. It's like your brain freezes. Like people will say, well, why didn't you take a picture? Why didn't you take it? It's like seeing a ghost or something. Your mind freezes and you're trying to process it. I think that when it saw me reach for the rod, it probably thought it was something. But it was gone within 2 seconds. I just caught the tail end of it going up under the bank. Now, I don't know if it has a cave up under there, but I remember since I've had this experience listening to shows, and I don't know if it was one of your shows or another show, but a gentleman was talking about how he lived in the South and his grandfather told him don't go to a certain lake because the boogers live up under there. And he went there with his friend and something grabbed his friend's leg and pulled him down. And he saw the thing was like up underneath the bank and they had caves. So I don't know if this is something they do, if they live up under the caves, up underneath the banks and dig out caves. But when I heard that, it kind of clicked. And I'm like, well, maybe that's what this one is doing. I don't know.
Yeah, I do remember that now. I can't remember which episode it was, but I do remember that. What's fascinating is the creature was smart enough to fish kind of like they do in the South. I think they call it noodling when they're trying to get catfish. You put your arm down there and the catfish basically bites onto your arm and you pull the fish out. That kind of sounds like that's what that thing was doing. You had mentioned the chattering. You were kind of hearing this weird chattering and then it would snort like a pig when it was trying to pull the fish out. Did it remind you of the Sierra sounds at all when you were hearing that chattering?
Sierra, what is that?
Yeah, I know you're kind of new to the subject. The Sierra sounds, you'll hear people refer to it as like the samurai chatter. This gentleman, Ron Moorhead, a great guy, he captured them back in the early 70s. I want to say the activity actually started in the late 60s where they were interacting with these things. And the guys ended up setting up recorders and they captured these things vocalizing back and forth to each other. You hear them in the intro of the show when Claire is talking Claire's from Great Britain. When she's talking, I plug in some of the Sierra sounds. Actually, you know what? I have a different clip for you. This is Ron Moorhead's Sierra sounds, but this is a little bit different than what you hear in the intro. This is when the two creatures were actually fighting over food. Is this kind of what you heard? And you know, listening to that again, and you talking about it having that pig snort, I swear I heard some of the pig snorting in there, or what I would interpret as that. But was that kind of what you heard? Something like that?
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, like something like that, but more like a lummox type would talk, like somebody that had mental. It was like, whoa. Then it was like, and every time it would tug, it would make a snort sound. And I sit there and watched it. It must have been like 3 minutes before that light clicked on. And it would pull back, and it was hunched over. So I'm seeing the rear of it, and it looked like a bear. And it was bulky like that, like a bear. It reached over that, hunching its back. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, what is it doing? What is it trying to pull? Is it stuck? Then the light clicked on. It raises up and turns torso and looks up at me. And we just lock eyes.
Have you ever gone back to that place?
I've gone back in the daytime, and I've seen people fishing there. And I just sit and watch them. And I look all around and watch it, because I've talked to other people about this, and they look at you like you're crazy. You get all type of. I told a buddy that I grew up with. He's like my little brother. We grew up little together, and he'll joke. He'll call me names. He'll call me Bigfoot guy. This and that. He'll send me funny things to my phone. They don't take you seriously. So I just stopped talking to people about it. But it really shook me up. Like I said, I won't go. If I go out at night, I'm in the car and I'm there. I won't go anywhere there's any woods or anything, because this thing looked like it could rip me to pieces. Just a muscular frame. It didn't look like, I've heard stories. They're like, oh, they're 9-10 feet tall. It wasn't that tall. Maybe I'm a big guy. I'm 6 foot, about 280 pounds. This thing looked like it was maybe 6'4", 6'5", but it was all muscle, no fat, no. It looked like the legs looked like he could have leaped up onto the stairs and jumped on me. That's how muscular the thighs were.
Yeah, listening to the behavior of kind of what it was doing makes me think that it was a juvenile or a younger one. And hearing that it was probably 6'5" makes me even more think that it was probably a juvenile. When you went back there, did you kind of look over the edge to see if you could see where it went?
No, I couldn't work myself up to do that. I'll go by the stairs and I'll watch the people fish. I'll look over, but I won't. Just the way this thing looked at me in the face, like it looks like if it bites you, it'll bite your wrist off or something. I couldn't do that. There's only one gentleman that took me seriously. The job that I'm working at now, he told me a story about how before he was doing this job, see where I live at, there was a lot of coal mines. And before they can build buildings on the coal mines, they have to fill them up with concrete. So I guess the foundation is strong enough or else the building will collapse in or whatever. And that was his job. He was a driller, and he would fill up. And he said a lot of places he went to in remote areas, they would start to drilling. He would see them run out the caves. And how I got to meet him is because I would go on a lunch and I would listen to your show. I listened to the show, and he says, "You always listen to stuff." He said, "You seen one?" And I decided to tell him. I said, "Yeah, I saw one." He said, "I used to see him too." And that's when he told me the story about the job he did. So I guess these things live in the mines. They live in the caves underground. They come out and do what they do. I don't know.
Yeah, Andy, there's a lot of reports of them, and it looks like they're utilizing caves or abandoned buildings as kind of a shelter or a temporary shelter. It makes you wonder sometimes. I've been in this for a little bit of time now, and sometimes it feels like you're chasing a ghost. Sometimes it feels like, it's like, well, where do they go? I was real curious if there was some sort of cave system up underneath that, cliff or the edge of the water. But I get why you didn't go back down there and take a look. I really think that you ran into a juvenile of one of these things. And even with your description, a lot of eyewitnesses will describe the teeth like you did. And it's probably the most common way people will describe the teeth. They'll say they look like chiclets. Sometimes other people run into what I think is a subspecies of these things, and the teeth are very different. But I've had eyewitnesses go, yeah, their teeth look like chiclets. And when it opened its mouth, this thing looked like it could put a couple baseballs in its mouth, no problem.
This thing looked like it could fit a cantaloupe, a pumpkin, and just chop it in half. That's how wide the mouth was. Softball, easy. Like I'm just looking at it like, what the hell is that? And I'm thinking, did an orangutan escape from zoo? But then when I look in the face, I'm like, is that a person? It looked like both. That's the only thing I can say. It looked like both. I don't know if there was another one there, and it was sold because I was fixed on this one, and it could have been another one there. Like, this is 3-something in the morning, and maybe I don't know, because there's nothing but woods all up and down the Susquehanna.
Yeah, through eyewitness testimony, I can tell you my opinion, of course. I don't think that they're ever really alone. This one being what I think is a juvenile, the way it was acting, how it reacted to you. The one thing that really stays with me about your encounter, I've had other eyewitnesses report the pig snorting sound, where they'll say it sounded like a pig, but it wasn't quite a pig. And just now listening to the Sierra sounds again, that other clip I played for you, and maybe I'm dreaming, but when you listen to that, there's a few times where it sounds like it snorts like a pig.
Yeah, I'm like, what is it doing? At first, I thought it was stuck. I thought it was a bear and it's stuck. But then I'm like, bears don't talk. What is? Then when it turned around and looked at me, it's like my heart stopped. Your brain is trying to process something that shouldn't be there. That's the only way I can describe. I think these things, like, I've been doing my research. I think these things sit and watch people. I've heard a lot of stories where they say they'll be in the woods and they watch everything you do. They watch your. I had a gun on my hip. I had a fishing pole, and I had a knife also. The knife was in my pocket, but I had the fishing pole with the little bucket. I had a bucket, and I had a little tackle box. And I don't know. Maybe you figured the pole was a weapon. And when I went to pick it up, it took off. I'm glad it didn't attack me.
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't attack you either. And like I said before, I think most of the time they'll leave you alone. It's only when you engage with them, people get hurt. I know that you're kind of new to the subject, Andy, and I ask everyone on the show, what do you think Sasquatch is? And there's no wrong answer, of course, because no one really knows. But what is your opinion? What do you think Sasquatch is?
This is the part that bothers me, because I believe in God. I believe there's a creator. But since I've been doing my research on these things, I think these things are the original Neanderthals that everybody thinks is extinct, because they have them here. They have in Russia, what do they call it? The Almasty or something. They have in China, what's it called? The Yeren. They have in the Himalayas, what is it? The abominable snowman, the Yeti. Well, I think there's even a little one on. I think they never really went extinct. And maybe something or aliens or something came down and messed with their DNA and we're the outcome of it. I don't know. I'm thinking I think the Neanderthals didn't really go extinct. I think they're original inhabitants, and maybe we're the abominations, and they stay away from us, and maybe they're waiting for us to kill ourselves over so they can come back out. Maybe they don't have children as frequent as we do. That's why we don't see as much of them. Maybe they go into their females go into their cycle once every couple of years or something like that. I don't know, but I think they're the what would they say? It was the Neanderthals and us, right? And then we were supposedly killed them all out. But I think they didn't. I think because I watch a lot of this stuff. Like I was watching a program where a whale washed up on a beach. It was a blue whale or a gray whale, and it was bitten in half. What the hell bites a whale in half? It's got to be like a megalodon or something like that. But those are supposed to be extinct, right? They're still around. I think. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of that will bite a whale in half. I think that a lot of the stuff we think is gone. Maybe it's all not gone. Maybe it's still here. We're so busy in our day-to-day lives that maybe we should just stop and take a look. You know what I mean?
You know, I do remember that blue whale that was bitten in half. That was like 10 years ago or something like that. Maybe a little bit more. And a blue whale, if my memory is right, they're like 110, 120 feet long. I think they weigh over like 300,000 pounds. And I do remember that because they stacked a bunch of school buses, and it was several school buses for the length of this whale, and it was bitten in half. I mean, it does make you wonder.
What bites a whale in half? It's got to be like a megalodon or maybe a prehistoric something that's still in the water. I think that a lot of this stuff is still out there, and we as people, we think that we're the only thing. I was watching another thing where they have pterodactyls in the Midwest. People say they see things that look like pterodactyls in Arizona hills and the mountains that come down in the nighttime and hunt. Like, and in the Congo, there's supposed to be dinosaurs still around. Way like some type of thing that chases off elephants and hippos. Who says this stuff all died out? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from. It reminds me of what was that fish? The coelacanth, that fish that they rediscovered, quote unquote, rediscovered. I think it was back in, I want to say 1940, might have been 39. But it was this fish that scientists said, oh yeah, that thing, it's been gone for 360 million years ago is the last time it was on this earth. And sometimes I wonder where they get some of those time frames. But I think it was a bunch of guys in Asia that were catching them. And they're like, oh, yeah, we eat them every night. What are you talking about? These things are extinct. They had no clue. So I do understand where you're coming from. I can tell you my hang up with Sasquatch being a Neanderthal, but I'll come back to that in a second. You had mentioned they're all over the earth. I mean, there's reports in Russia. There's reports in Australia. There's reports in Asia. They're everywhere. When you read a report from Russia, like with the Almas, it sounds like a Bigfoot report from North America. They're seeing the same thing we are. It might be slightly different, but generally speaking, it's the same thing. And, even when I have people who have these things on their property, and it's not one encounter, they're seeing it multiple times over multiple years. And even then I'll ask them, where do you think that they're going? This is your property. You know your property well. Where do you think they go at night or wherever? And the answer is always, I don't know. Can I ask you, why do you think it's so hard to catch up with them?
I think they use the night. I think they've become nocturnal because of, I guess, people or machines or weapons or stuff. Maybe they use the night. They can use the night to hide and move and do what they got to do. Most of the times we sleep at nighttime. I think they're just masters of their environment. And they move so fast. Like, you're not going to outrun this thing. You're not going to outmuscle it. If you got a gun you better have good shot placement or something like that can blow off its arms or something like that. Because from the way they're built, they're going to rip you to pieces. I just think that's what it is. They come out at night, do what they got to do, then they go back and sleep during the daytime. Like I remember hearing, watching a program, and the Native Americans said that they would come and they would smell them in the nighttime, and they would kidnap their wives and their kids and stuff like that. But they would always come out at nighttime. They would come out of the mountains. So maybe they're nocturnal.
Yeah, could be. I'm more skeptical, I guess. It just seems weird to me. And I have thought about them being a Neanderthal before, and I actually like that theory a lot, Andy. But where I kind of get hung up with the Neanderthals is they weren't that big. I think your average female was about 5 foot tall. I think your average male was about 5'5". Your average Sasquatch report is like 7 feet tall. So that's my only hang up with the Neanderthals. You know, not only height, but I don't think they were as big as like Sasquatch is reported or eyewitnesses have seen. The Neanderthal, while more stocky than us, more sturdy, more thick than us, doesn't come close to a Sasquatch. That's my opinion, of course.
But is it the one that they found? What is that the total of all of the Neanderthals? I remember they showed the Hobbit people. They had sat there. Her name was Lucy. She was a Hobbit person, and she was only 4 foot something. Or maybe another region they grow bigger. Maybe I don't know. It's just like people. We come in all shapes and sizes. Maybe the one that the skeleton that they found were 5 something. But then I've heard stories of them finding skeletons of giants that are 8, 9, 10 feet. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. It's hard to argue with that. We do pull giant skeletons out of the earth, and it makes you wonder what they are. You had brought up Lucy. Lucy was actually an Australopithecus. She wasn't actually a Neanderthal, you know, for whatever that's worth. It's such a weird fossil record we have. And, you know, I just kind of got caught up on the Neanderthal thing when I researched them. This is many years ago. There's actually a guy named Danny Vendermini. He wrote a book called Them and Us, and he talks about the Neanderthal, and he thinks that they're alive and well even up until today. I tried to get him on the show, but he didn't want his theory being confused with Sasquatch, so he wouldn't come on, which is okay, you know. Let me ask you, I mean, if you had the chance, would you want to see another one?
I would, but I'd have to be more prepared. I don't want to see one by shock. I want to know that I'm going to look and it's going to be over there, and have the right firepower to defend myself. And I would just want to be able to take a photo or just sit and watch, and because it's like it's like seeing a ghost, you know? You're looking at something that I've never seen a ghost in my life, but I guess this would be the equivalent of seeing one. Like, what is that? Is that supposed to be? Is that what is? There's a million questions go through your head, and you just freeze.
Yeah, you're right. You do freeze. You do freeze for sure. I've often said it wouldn't be bad to see another one, maybe from a helicopter or from a tank or something like that. It's an amazing account, and I want to thank you for your service as a police officer. And I know that's a tough gig. I know many years ago I thought about becoming a cop, and now I'm kind of glad that I didn't. But I do respect the guys that serve our country, put the badge on, and try and keep order. You know, after all your years as a cop, is there one call that kind of stays with you today? You know, something like you couldn't forget. It was a real odd call.
One call that I can remember was we got called for domestic violence, and we showed up to the house. A woman was screaming, but it was towards the back of the yard. And we ran around the back, up on the porch. They had a sliding, those sliding glass doors where you can go into the deck to the kitchen. We looked through the glass door, and there was this guy attacking the woman. So we broke through the glass to stop him. This guy was like, he felt like wrought iron, like a piece of steel. Took 4 of us to hold him down. These people were Latin, and when one of my partners looked around the house, there was a lot of, what do you call that stuff? The statues of the Latin saints, Santa Maria, all the stuff. It's not pentagrams, but they have the statues of the Latin saints and candles and stuff. Apparently, she was telling us that he was possessed. We thought he was on drugs or something like that. They took him to the hospital, they tested him. There was no drugs in the system. She told us he was possessed by a demon. They wound up taking him to the psychiatric place over in New York City. But that's the one thing that stands out the most, that story. But I'll never forget how strong this guy was.
Lila, who is from Tennessee, writes, I grew up knowing about these things. They were on my grandfather's property. He used to feed them. I was terrified of them. My grandfather told me, if you don't hurt them, they won't hurt you. I don't believe that. Lila describes growing up on her grandfather's farm.
Well, my grandparents owned 89 acres here, and we lived with them while I was growing up. And the first thing I really remember was my bed was next to the wall in the window. And I can remember every night just about looking out the window and thinking this man was standing outside looking at me. And when I finally got old enough to tell my grandfather, I said, why is this man watching me every night? And he was like, what? I said, there's a man watching me every night when I go to sleep. Sometimes there's 2. And after I told him that, the window was like a big picture window. And it wasn't very long after that he redid that window to where it was just a tiny window up on the wall instead of reaching down nearly to the floor. And I would see things in the windows occasionally after that, but never when I'd go to bed, see him actually watching me after that.
Yeah, do you think your grandfather knew what it was?
Oh, I know he did. He didn't speak to me very much about them, but he would feed them. And once I got old enough, I would tag along. And he told me he was feeding dogs. And he had set the plate on the ground, and I saw they would stay in behind the bushes where we couldn't see them. And I saw the arm come through the trees and grab a chicken leg. I remember it was chicken leg, and go back in. And I turned around and looked at him. I said, Grandpa, that's not a dog. And he says, well, let's just say it's my special dogs. And that's when I knew he knew, but he wasn't going to really tell me. And the only twice after that did he ever say anything to me. Once is when I was a teenager, and I heard what sounded like a newborn human child crying in the woods. And it was the middle of the night, and I walked in the house, and I said, Grandpa, I said, there's a baby over there crying in the woods. He goes, that's not a baby you want to go find. Stay inside. We had a trailer, and we kept the lawnmower in underneath the trailer in a door where it was underpinned. And I went to go get the lawnmower out to mow for them, and one of them was laying up and underneath the trailer. It looked like a piece of rolled up shag carpeting, a light tan color, but you could tell the back was to me. and you could tell it was the outline of what looked like a man laying there, but he was the same. His fur looked like that old shag carpeting from the 70s, and he never turned around when I opened the door. And when I seen him, I slammed it shut. But he was just like laying on his side with his back to me. And he couldn't have been more than 15 feet from me when I did that. And just the minute I caught sight, I slammed the door and I went back around. And I came back out and come around, and Grandpa says, I thought you was going to mow the lawn. I said, I'm not getting it with that thing in underneath there. And he said, he laughed and he says, it's not going to hurt you. And he went and got the lawnmower for me.
Yeah, I've had a few accounts like this before, Lila, where, and coincidentally enough, it's usually the World War II generation. You know, the men now are grandfathers, or the women are grandmothers, and you'll hear accounts like this. I mean, have come forward in the last 10 years. Makes me wonder why he was feeding it. Growing up on this property, did you ever have run-ins with them when you were out running around on the property? I know they had come up to your window, but did you ever encounter them when you were out just playing in the woods?
I didn't, but some people that, our next door neighbors married a woman from Mexico. And her family had come up to visit her, and they didn't speak English. And we always pick blackberries in the summer because this place is full of them. And we were picking the blackberries, and all of a sudden, the one woman started screaming. And we said, what's going on? What's going on? And she goes, there's a face in the bushes. My grandfather laughed. He says, oh, it's just a cow. And she was going, no, this was a human. This is not a cow. And I finally got her sister to ask her, how do you know it wasn't a cow? She goes, I've seen cows. This is not a cow. And they left and never came back. The one time that I really seen one good face to face, I was playing and felt like something was watching me. And I looked up, and I was in what we call carport, and it was across the road in the woods looking at me. And it scared me so bad that I crawled up underneath a car. I stayed under that car until I heard voices. And when I came out, there was some men standing in almost the exact same place. And they were a good 2 feet shorter than what I had just seen. And it was at least 7.5 foot tall, had black hair, and the hair on its head was longer than the hair on its body. And the head hair was kind of curly. It was so black that it kind of shone blue in the sunlight. It had brown eyes, I remember that. And it was just sitting there, or standing beside a tree staring at me. It didn't move when I seen it. And it didn't really have any facial expression, just staring. And like I said, it scared me so bad I went up and underneath the car. And I remember I went underneath the car because I thought it could get under the truck. But the car was slow enough to the ground where I didn't think it could get its arm up and underneath it to get to me.
What was it about it that scared you so much, do you think? Because you already knew at this point they were there.
Right. The fact that it was that close, just the way it was staring at me, plus how big it was. Because when I was little, I didn't realize how big they were when I was looking through the window. It wasn't until several years later that I realized, okay, wait a minute. This window is a good 4 to 5 foot off the ground. And where I'm laying, I'm looking up at the top of the window, which was about 3 to 4 foot tall. And the head is over the top of this window. And it didn't really hit me until I seen the one staring at me, just how big they were.
Did you ever talk to your grandmother? What was her thoughts on it?
I never talked to my grandmother about it until right before she passed away. And that was in 2006. And she asked me something, and she goes, well, how are you dealing with the Bigfoot? And I turned around and looked at her and said, what about the Bigfoot? I said, did you see them? Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, if you don't know what I'm talking about, why did you just ask me this question? I don't know what you're talking about. And that's all she would ever say to me. My mother, I know, saw them, but she would never admit that that's what she was seeing. There was I think it was Weekly World News that back 30 years ago had a picture of what was supposed to have been the Russian Bigfoot captured on the front page of it. And she looked at that and she goes, I've seen something like that. I said, Mama, you've seen the Bigfoot then? No, but I've seen something that looks like that. After that, she was coming in home from going shopping. And when she come in the door, she says, that big man just ran across the road in front of me. And he wasn't wearing anything. I said, whoa. I said, that Bigfoot just ran in front of you. No, it was a big man. He wasn't wearing anything. But he come across one fence, landed in the middle of the road, and she goes, and just pushed off and went over the fence on the other side and down through the field. And I said, Mama, that was a Bigfoot. And she goes, no, it was not. It's just that big man. And that's all she would ever admit to me. It's just a big man.
Why do you think your grandfather was so open to it as far as feeding them? I mean, was he doing this on a regular basis?
He was for several years. And then until he got to the point where he couldn't no more. And I don't know why he did it. I don't know if he was trying to form a relationship. If he had a relationship that I just didn't really know that much about. Because apparently he had been feeding them before I was ever born. So I don't know how he came to know that they were here or anything. But we would go up at least once or twice a week to feed them. But after I saw the arm come out, I would never go with him again.
You really didn't fear him.
He didn't seem to have any fear. He let us wander all over this place and never said watch out for anything or anything. So I don't know if he thought they were harmless. I don't trust that. I'll just be honest with you. I do not trust that they're harmless because they scared the out of me. And like I said, I won't walk around outside at night. You can't pay me to go in the woods half the time. I have to be with somebody to go in the woods. I'm sitting out here right now on the back porch, but I won't sit out here at night by myself.
Did you end up taking over that land after your grandfather died?
I live on the last 3 acres that's in the family. The rest of it's been sold off, but I have the last 3 acres.
And do you think, I mean, this is many years on this property, and your neighbor even had that incident. Did you ever hear any more from the neighbors over the years?
Well, the lady that lived down from us, she was actually, her family had been, my grandfather bought this place in 1944, and her family had already been living here at that time. And by the time I was a teenager, she was in her 80s, and she couldn't get around very well. And she had what an old root cellar in the back is where she kept all her canned stuff. And she asked me one day, go out to that root cellar and get her some green beans. And I started out her back door, and she stopped me, and she goes, wait a minute. She goes, let me make certain that damn SID ticket anywhere. And I knew what she meant the minute she said that, but I'd never heard that word before. And she went and she looked, she come back, she goes, okay, it's safe for you to go out. And that always stuck with me that she wanted to make sure I was safe walking out that door.
Yeah, it's interesting what she called them. That's actually a Native American word here in the Pacific Northwest. And the local Native Americans, that's what they call them on top of Mount St. Helens. That's the name they use for them.
Right. And I knew her first husband had been a Native American from the Pacific Northwest. So I just always figured that's where she got the word from. And then I found out years later that sure enough, that's from the Pacific Northwest. They're not here like they used to be. And I think it's because there's been a lot of construction and logging done. But occasionally, I can tell you when they come back through. If you've been around them and they come through, it's like the hairs on the back of your neck just go to standing up. And I'll hear wood knocks occasionally. And I have heard them whoop occasionally. Although the weirdest thing I ever heard was back a few years ago, my grandparents' old house was empty. And I walked outside to go to my van, and I heard what sounded like a 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum on its mother. But it was all gibberish. You couldn't understand what was being said. And it came from their old house. And every once in a while you would hear what I guess would have been the parent grunt. But just like a 2-year-old throwing a hissy fit from hell, excuse my language. And I walked back inside and grabbed my niece's boyfriend. I said, come out here and listen to this. And he walked out and he goes, I've never heard anything like that before. And it was so loud that there's no way a child 50 yards from me could be that loud. Because it sounded like they was right on top of me. Yes. But I could tell they were on the other side of that house. And
you're talking about your grandparents' home?
Yes. Yeah. I live about 50 yards from it, but my property is separate from that property now.
I wanted to ask you, Lila, back in the day, there was all this land to kind of run around, and I know it's been sold off over the years, but did you ever notice an area where they hung out the most, or do you think they were passing through at certain times, or do you think they were just there all the time?
They kind of stay in what I call the back 40. The way the property's set up is you've got like the house and the barn next to the road, and there's a ditch line directly in behind the house. Then a field, which is about a 5-acre field, and another ditch line and another 5-acre field. And then there was woods on the other side of that field, and those woods back there is where they usually would stay. But now when I was real little, it was woods all the way up to the house. And he cut all that down. I was about 5 or 6 years old and cleared it out and made it into other fields.
I gotcha. On this property, at any point, did you ever see any weird lights?
I never saw any weird lights. I've listened to your show and heard others talking about them. The only weird light I've ever had is sometimes when I'm laying down trying to go to sleep. You know, you'll be laying there with your eyes closed, and it's like a bright flash of light goes across the bedroom. Like somebody just took a picture with one of them old flash cameras. And, you know, I opened the eyes and there's nothing in the room. No reason for there to have been a flash of light. But I've never seen an orb.
Yeah, that's strange. Makes me wonder what it is. What do you think that these creatures are, Lila? What's kind of your take?
Well, because I have heard them speak before and actually make out words, I think they are some kind of a human. I don't know if they're a Neanderthal. I know Scott Carpenter thought they were Nephilim, and that's about as good as any explanation I can come up with. Now, that's changed over the years. I used to think they were the Gigantopithecus, but just some of the things that I know they did, I don't get that they're just a big ape. They're too smart for that.
Yeah, I'm really curious on why you feel that way. Is it based on things that have happened that you've talked about, or was there other things that made you kind of come to that conclusion?
Well, like being able to get in underneath the house. That was a closed up area, and they were able to open that up and get into it. Knowing that a freezer held food, they would open the freezer sometimes and get them. We had a freezer on the back porch that was accessible, and they would open the screen door and then open the freezer to get some food out. And I don't know any dog or anything that can do that around here. They just, and then when they wouldn't pop out, but I could go walking through the fields to get the horses in, and always when I hit one area, I'd be walking, and all of a sudden it'd be, okay, you need to run now. And it'd be straight from walking, I got to run. And I always felt like one of them chased me, and he thought he was playing with me. And it was a weird feeling, because I'd be running at least 2 or 3 times a year. I'd go through that area and I'd think, I got to run. And that went on for about 5 years. It had to have been a juvenile. And I really think that he thought he was playing with me, because he never tried to catch me. He just would chase me. And I wouldn't turn around and look to see, how close. I was like, I don't even want to see it. I'm just getting out of here. And, dogs, they'll chase you, but you kind of got to initiate it with them. So that always made me think, okay, these are a lot smarter than any of the other animals. And we had horses and cows and dogs and cats and goats and a few other animals here. But none of them acted like that towards me. And they knew to stay hidden. I could tell they knew to stay hidden. I'd have to walk through a wooded area to get to the field. And it was when I would walk through that one woody area about halfway through it. And like I said, it wasn't every time. It was maybe 2 or 3 times a year that it would happen. But it would be, okay, time to run. And it would just instantly, and I just always followed my gut. I took off. But you could hear something moving in behind of you. And like I said, I wouldn't turn around and look. I was too scared to look.
At any given one time, how many do you think that there were on the property?
I know there was what I would call the alpha and his mate. And then there was the black one that was staring at me and the brown one under the porch or under the house. So that'd be at least 4. And I took it that those 2 were the children of the alpha one and his mate. And I think one of those children is the one that still comes through occasionally. And they don't stay more than a day or so now when they come through.
Why do you think after all the years of being on this property, they were coming up to your window, your neighbors have seen them, and I know there's a few other things we're going to talk about, but after all the years, them pacing you out or chasing you out, why do you think that they never hurt you? Because a lot of the behavior doesn't sound like I want to kill you type behavior. And even going off of your theory, Lila, of it being primate, probably something closer to human, even humans will hurt you. There's some bad ones out there, but why do you think it never hurt anyone?
The only thing I can think is because Grandpa must have had some kind, because he did feed them. He had been feeding them before I was ever born. maybe they saw him as a friend and we were just an extension of that. I know after he passed away, and he died in 96, they did tend to be a little bit more aggressive after he was gone. Never outright aggressive, but just breaking branches in behind the house, throwing rocks on top of the house. And they never did that when he was still living. They never came up and hit the house until after he died. So I don't know, because he hadn't been feeding them for at least 10 years before he died. So I know it wasn't just sudden stopping of the food or anything. So it could only have been they got more aggressive after he passed, if they respected him or something.
Yeah, it could be. Makes me wonder why your grandfather started feeding them. And I get it. We're all curious. Human beings are curious, and sometimes that's the reason. But most of the time, when people live out in the country, if you start asking follow-up questions and really drill down on it, what you'll find is a couple things. One, they will do it to get them to back away from the home or trying to get them to back off. You'd mentioned the freezer, how they would just come up and take food out of the freezer, or you'd made mention of your grandfather cutting the forest back. And even with gardens out in the country, a lot of times I'll talk to people in the country and they'll start feeding it so that these things will leave their garden alone. Makes me kind of curious if that's why he was doing it.
It might have. Now, he did keep a garden, but the garden is a half mile from the house. And that garden is pretty much right smack where they would stay. So I always wondered why he planted the garden so far from the house. And that's the only thing I could ever figure, is because he was sharing it with them.
Yeah, and that could be the case. That's one thing you'll find very common too, is when people have these things on their property and they have a garden, I'll ask them, how far is the garden from the house? And it's always way away from the house. You'll never hear of it being right next to the home. I wish your grandfather was still around. I'd love to pick his brain, find out when all of this started and what kind of led up to this whole peace treaty of, hey, I'm going to bring you food.
Well, I never thought about it until you said this. When my mother was a child, there was a fruit orchard in behind the house. And by the time I come along, grandfather had cut every bit of those trees down. And all that was left was a couple of apple trees in the front yard and a couple of peach trees in the backyard. So I just wonder if maybe he cut them down to keep them from coming up to the house.
Yeah, because otherwise, why would you cut down a fruit orchard, especially on the country?
Right. And I never thought about that before, but I remember my mother telling me that there had been a fruit orchard in behind the house.
The crazy part is, your grandfather kind of comes across like he really didn't fear them one bit. And, if these things, I was trying to put myself in people's shoes. And, if my granddaughter had come in and was basically saying, hey, there's these two guys looking at me through the window and all these other things that happened, I don't know, your grandfather's a better man than I am, because I probably would have put an end to it real quick. But, he really, it's like you guys played out on this property. And why do you think he took you that one day to go, quote unquote, feed the dogs?
I kind of got the impression that he was letting them know that we were his family and not to mess with us. That this was his family. You've got yours, I've got mine. And like I said, he did feed them. He let them take out of that garden. Outside of coming up to the house occasionally, they didn't really bother us unless we were out in the fields. And even then, they didn't really get aggressive. They'd just be, you could tell they were there. Or, like I said, that one, like he was trying to play. I know they watched the house occasionally because you know when something's staring at you. And you could feel that when you were outside. And I know after he got to where he couldn't feed them anymore, my mother had a trailer in front of where he lived at the time. He had moved in with my mother, and then my mother ended up buying another smaller trailer that sat like 20 feet in front of the first one. And it had a sliding glass door on it that faced the woods. And she got to the point where she would not stay in that trailer unless somebody else was with her. Because she said she felt like something was going to come through those doors after her. The minute he died, she moved that trailer 6 miles into town. She never did spend another night out here.
Yeah, it's too bad that your mom is in such denial. A lot of people are. I think it's kind of a coping mechanism that they do. That feeling of being watched and around the home. Sometimes people say they saw glowing eyes. Sometimes people will say it was kind of a reflection. And, your mom specifically saying, hey, I feel like I'm being watched directly from the forest. Did you guys ever see them come in closer to the home and catch eye shine or anything like that?
I never saw eye shine. I think my husband has, but he thinks it was something else, so he won't admit to it. He thought it was actually the reflection off of a law enforcement badge. And I was like, well, where you say that was at, that's way too tall for somebody with a badge. They were raiding the people next door, but he thinks that he saw them before they actually raided that house. Cops raided the house, and he thought, I'd say 3 or 4 nights before they raided the house, he came in and said, I just seen, he goes, the only thing I can think it is a reflection off the police badge across the road in the field. I said, oh, he goes, yeah, he goes, it was in the field and it was above the Explorer. And I'm like, somebody standing in that field, their chest is not going to be up above the Explorer. And this was about 10 o'clock at night. And he says, no, he goes, it had to have been a police badge. That's all it could have been. And just, I was sitting there going, but if it was above the Explorer, that's not a badge. Nobody's that tall.
Oh, I gotcha. So he was thinking he was seeing the sheriff badge kind of twinkle. But from the other side of the Explorer, I mean, if I stood on the other side of an Explorer, you'd probably just see the top of my head. Very strange. Some people might ask, why do you fear them? Because you grew up on this property. Nothing has happened in all these years. Yet you have this fear for them. And I get it. Believe me, I fear them. So this isn't a judgment call. But you're thinking maybe even that younger one is coming back. Why not kind of explore the property? I mean, 3 acres is still a lot of land, and to see if they're still in the area, to see if there's still that interaction that might happen.
I tried to back a few years ago, and it was kind of okay, you're far enough from the house, you need to go back now. And it's just that feeling when I do try. My sister-in-law actually was walking through the backfield, and she got chased back to the house. And when she came back to the house, I asked her what was wrong. She goes, something big just chased me through the field. I was like, well, did you see it? She goes, no, but it was huge. I was like, well, how do you know it was huge if you didn't see it? Just trust me, it was huge. And that was about 7 years ago. And so I just kind of stay on my 3 acres and don't venture off of it. Of the 89 acres that he had, I only have 3 acres. So that's all owned by other people and private property. So I don't want to intrude on their property.
Yeah, I get it. I completely get it. And sometimes I'll ask questions that I think the audience might be thinking. But believe me, I get where you're coming from. You know, your next door neighbor had the experience with them, and a lot of time has passed over the years. Have you ever thought about going and talking to some of your neighbors and asking them, hey, have you ever seen anything weird running around here? Any weird wildlife? That sort of thing?
Well, this is the weird thing. Back a few years ago, my one neighbor came to me and he goes, hey, you believe in Bigfoot, right? And I said, well, yeah, I do. I've seen him. He goes, I've got something weird in my cornfield. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, there's a circle. He goes, it's not on the edge of the cornfield where the deer and everything will eat at. He goes, it's out in the middle of the cornfield. He goes, and there's this area where the ears have been pulled off the stalks, bitten in half, and stacked up. I was like, excuse me? He goes, they've been broke off the stalk. They're bitten in half through the silks and everything. He goes, and then they're stacked up in like a pyramid shape. I said, well, do you see any footprints or anything? And he goes, no. He goes, the ground's too dry right the minute. He goes, but I put out cages because he goes, first I thought, maybe raccoons or something. He goes, so I put out cages. He goes, I haven't caught anything. He goes, have you ever heard of this before? And I said, well, no, but the neighbor that you rented the house to down next to me, which was my grandparents' old house, they had puppies. And the mama dog had them in the ditch line, and when they went to get those puppies, all 6 of them were laying in a straight row with the back half bitten off, and you could tell they were bitten in half. But the back half was nowhere to be seen, just the front half. And I know one other neighbor told me that their son wouldn't go outside because of the bears. And I was like, but the bears I'm about 15 miles from the Cherokee National Forest and about 50 from the Smoky Mountains where I'm at. And there's no black bears down here. So that was weird to us.
That's terrible about the puppies. Makes me hate them even more.
Yeah. My husband suggested maybe a wildcat had done that because there had been mountain lions come through.
Yeah, nothing about that sounds like a mountain lion kill to me. Sounds like the same thing that was down in the cornfield stacking corn. And you said it had lined up the puppies?
They were laid out in a row. And there was 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah, a mountain lion's not going to put everything in a row. That sounds more like these things. It's they have like a crackhead way of with their food and other things. You'll hear a lot of eyewitness testimony to where they're very particular about stuff like that. Like what was going on in the cornfield with the corn being stacked up in like a pyramid. These puppies eaten in half and lined up in a row. I really hate to hear that. And I felt like a terrible human being because a lot of times I have more sympathy for animals than I do for human beings, which is a terrible thing to say. But growing up on this property, I mean, you had animals. How did your animals kind of react when they were around the property?
Well, we always had German Shepherds. That was the only kind of dog we had growing up. And they would stay close to the house. They would walk, when we'd walk in the fields to get the horses and such in, they would follow us. But like when the one would start chasing me, the dogs would be gone. I never would even see the dogs leave. They were gone so fast. And I had a big white German Shepherd at that time, and she disappeared the minute I'd go through those woods. And the horses and cows, there would be times that it would be very hard to find them on the place. Like they were all like trying to hide themselves. And I'd have to walk, especially for the horses, sometimes I'd have to walk the whole place 3 or 4 times before I could find where they were. We had like 3 horses, and they would be like all together and like as far away from certain areas as they could get. Because usually, with horses, they'll be around the field, standing around the field, and they'd all be over in one corner. Now, I have 3 dogs now, and they'll hit, I have a fenced-in backyard, and they'll hit the back fence and then come up and underneath the porch. And we don't know what they're barking at. We did put one camera out there and a motion light, but never could see anything.
One of the things I wanted to kind of pick your brain on, Lila, earlier you had mentioned hearing that baby crying sound, and I've heard many eyewitnesses report that. Now, whether Sasquatch is doing that or not is, you can argue that, but I kind of think that they are. I kind of think that they are mimicking that sound. And that specific sound, if you ask eyewitnesses, they will say, at first glance, it sounds like a baby crying, but there was something off about it. There was something not quite right. And what's the easiest way to draw a human being out into the forest? Well, have a baby crying. Anyone with half of a soul is going to go looking for that baby. And I've often wondered, it feels like an ambush, like a trap.
Yeah, that at the time, I was only 16 the last time I heard it, but it sounded like a baby, but it was really loud. And I don't think a baby would be that loud. A human baby would not have been that loud, especially the distance the woods was from the house. And babies can get loud, but they can't get that loud. And the youngest person around us at that time was my niece, and she was 5. And this definitely wasn't her. So the direction it came from was the older lady that I was telling you about.
I hear you. Yeah, one of the last things I wanted to kind of ask you, Lila, and everyone's opinion changes. I think if your opinion doesn't change, you've kind of put yourself in a box, because eyewitnesses will come forward and they'll say X, Y, their creature did X, Y, and Z. And if it's one person, you can go, well, okay. But if it's multiple people that don't know each other and they're all kind of saying the same thing, your opinion has to evolve throughout this whole thing. You would think anyway. And I know you went from this thing being Gigantopithecus to now you're thinking it's some early man. And you could be right, 100%. And I get that, because I've had moments like that where I'll hear certain behavior and I'll think, man, I don't know about this thing being an ape. But, as your opinion changed over the years and you had these things on the property, why do you think that they're so hard to catch up with?
Well, I started thinking back over different things that had happened. And I was like, okay, an animal wouldn't do this. They wouldn't have just come up and slapped the house or knocked 3 times. An animal, like I said, I have dogs in the backyard and they hit the back of the house occasionally playing. And it's a totally different sound. And they never do it 3 times in a row and then wait and do it 3 more times. And to me, that's intelligence. They're trying to get your attention. Plus, they don't want to be found. They don't want to be seen. They know to hide from us. And when you think about it, look at how humans treat each other. They're pretty smart not wanting to be around us. And that's why my thinking on what they were changed. They know how to stay away from us. The ones I think we do see are the ones that are curious and the younger ones.
John and Jane are from North Carolina. Both John and Jane admit they didn't believe in Bigfoot until they purchased this home. Things changed in a big way.
So we were moving out of our old house. We had the movers there. They were finishing up, and I told my husband, I said, I'll go ahead. My car was full. I'll go ahead and go up to the house and start unloading it before we get there. So I came on to the house. It was around 4:30, and it was in January, so it got dark early. I got out of the car, I had my hands full. I was walking up the sidewalk to come to the front door, and I had a pebble or something that was thrown at me, and it landed in front of my feet. I thought that was odd, and I noticed that it was extremely quiet out. Of course, here I am. It's almost dark. I'm in an unfamiliar place. So I kind of thought that my imagination was kind of running wild with me. I took a couple more steps, and another one landed at my feet. I thought, okay, well, there has to be like an acorn tree or something that is around that I can't see. And it did sound like a pebble or stone that hit. So I went ahead and came on in. I stayed in the house until the movers and my husband come in. And I went outside, and sure enough, there were two pebbles on the sidewalk, and it was a brick sidewalk. There was no other pebbles on it, and it was in the same spot that I was at. So that was my first indication that something weird, something wasn't right, I guess you might say. I went upstairs to the bathroom because the movers were down here, and I was going to use the restroom, and I closed the door, and I looked out the window. It was a beautiful view. You could see the pond down below, see all the trees. There was no leaves on the trees or anything, and I noticed on the roof there was several pebbles on the roof, and I thought, that's weird. How did rocks or pebbles get on the roof? Didn't think anything else about it until we got in and got situated.
And I can imagine in your shoes, Jane, you're probably thinking, what throws rocks? Trying to go through your head on what is actually throwing rocks at you, even though they're little pebbles. And then seeing them on the roof. What about yourself, John? Jane's having all these things thrown at her. She's seeing pebbles on the roof. What were some of the things that you noticed?
Well, she immediately notified me of that, and when she noticed the pebbles on the roof, she showed them to me, and we've had things happen before and heard things, and we've never seen anything, and the biggest thing that I noticed, because we're a little further out now from where I work, and I have to get up a little earlier to get to work. And one of the first things I noticed was, the next day when I'm going to work, I step outside. Everyone else is, she's asleep in the house, and I walk out the front door, lock the front door, and I heard a real short whistle, maybe. Sounded like it was within 50 yards of me into the woods. And then I hear another one out toward our driveway. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. Didn't think a lot of it at the time. And then, about every other morning or so, or anytime I go outside, if we haven't been outside in a while, I'm hearing these, and it just dawns on me. I'm like, well, that sounds like an alert. That's like something, and I tell her about it, and we kind of start paying a little closer attention to things. And we love sitting outside at night and having a fire
just listening to everything. And cause, you never know what you're going to see or hear. And we have all manner of animals around here. But after the whistles, started hearing whoops on occasions. Every now and then we would hear some very loud vocalizations further out into the woods around us. And
kind of it would sound like an angry man sometimes, like
just wailing,
or like a mumbling.
Yeah, you're mumbling, wailing. That's pretty much the gist of the things that leading up.
So you guys are having a lot of weird things going on, stuff being thrown. You're hearing odd vocalizations. The angry man thing is interesting to me because I've heard other eyewitnesses say that sound like a really pissed off big man just screaming in the woods. If you would kind of walk me into this night, it was about a year ago, and you guys, it became reality really quick for you guys because there was not only one creature, but you guys saw several. What were you guys doing and what happened?
So it started a couple of nights prior to the night that we actually saw them. We were both outside. One of our dogs was out there with us, and the dog was laying in his bed. Me and John were on the couch, and he had fallen asleep. It was probably around 10:30, 11 o'clock that night. It was a beautiful night. There was no clouds. Stars were out. It was a good, crisp night. And I was sitting on my phone, enjoying TikTok. And from the front of the house, I could hear walking. And it sounded, I've hunted and I fished, like I said, since I was a little girl. I know what deer sounds like when it's walking. I know what squirrels and other animals sound like when they're walking, and this did not sound like it. It sounded like people walking from the front of the house to the left-hand side of the house, and there was, all you could hear was just the feet steps and the crunching of the leaves. As it got to the side of the house to where you could see us on the porch, it immediately stopped. It got really quiet. There was no more walking for a couple of minutes. I sat there and I was listening, and I heard one walk and it would stop. It would walk and it would stop. Then the ones that were behind it walked a little further, and then they would stop until they got in front of where we were sitting, kind of down in the grass area. And I was sitting there and I was trying to wake him up without making a lot of noise. And I finally got him awake, and I put my hand up to my mouth as to, listen. And you could kind of hear them walk away, but it wasn't as noisy as what they were the first time coming around the house. That was the first night. The second night, we were sitting out there, and around the same time, here they come again. And this time, I managed to have a flashlight because we had nothing that night. The only thing we had was our phones. So I thought, I want to have a flashlight. I did take the pistol out there with us, just because it could have been people. As far as I know, they were heavy walking, didn't care. And this time there was communication, and I cannot explain. It wasn't really speech, but it was a mumbling, and it wasn't quiet. It wasn't loud either. It was like, you have a group of people and they're talking with one another. They came around the side of the house. There was no stopping this time. They come on down, come on around, and I woke him up and I said, shh. And we took the flashlights then, and the flashlight, and I was looking around, and I did not see anything, and there was no more feet. They had stopped walking. So I knew that they were in front of us somewhere, and we could not see them. We could not see them. We looked up in the trees. We looked on the ground. We looked everywhere, and there was nothing out there. And I thought, I felt like I was going nuts because I knew that I heard a group come around the side of the house. Our dog, which never barks at anything, he just kind of lays there, and he was focused,
alert,
very alert the whole time. He was like watching them as they come around. He never barked, never made a peep, and he was sitting there, ears perked, and he was watching whatever it was down there. We could not see it. There was nothing there. We took the flashlight everywhere. We sat back down. It was a couple minutes later. We heard them start back up walking, and they were walking down towards the pond. We took the lights again. Nothing. And I think he actually came in and got another flashlight. So now we had like two out there. We have cameras back there. Nothing was picked up on the camera. Nothing was picked up on the camera up front. It was maybe a couple nights later, because I think it was on a Friday night. It was on a weekend. This was like Monday or Tuesday this happened, beginning of the week. So we were sitting out there again. I came in because it was cold that night. We were sitting here watching television. And go ahead.
Yeah, so it was later in the night, and it's cold, and I went to let the dogs out for the evening, and we were getting ready to crash and go to bed, and I'm letting them out for the last time, and they stay in the house. We don't leave them out at night. They were both out in the yard. Well, I hear it's very dry last fall here where we're at, and our pond, the water level had receded a lot, and so much so that you could walk across areas that had been underwater since we've lived here. And I heard something coming from way off to the kind of to the left of our home, and it sounded like it was 400 or 500 yards away. The only way I know how to describe what I heard, it sounded like I've ridden horses a lot, done a lot of trail riding stuff, and it sounds like riding a horse through thick brush. I can hear limbs popping and breaking. I can hear stuff brushing around and moving. And this is, like I said, it's 400 or 500 yards away. And I could hear it sounded like somebody talking. My dog, my oldest dog, he was sitting, he came up, he saw me when I heard it, and he heard it, and he came up next to me, and he was focused on it. And I called for my other dog to come up, and I put them in the house, and I yelled at Jane. I said, you need to come out here and grab the lights. I said, they're on their way. And so we just kind of sat down on our furniture back there for a little bit and waited, and had all the porch lights off and everything. Well, the hill to the left of our house down to the pond, it's very steep. It's probably 250 yards down to that pond, and it's almost straight up and down. And you almost need rappelling gear to get down this thing. We heard them cross this valley where the pond is, but it was dry at the time. And they just came and crossed that, and were chattering and talking the whole time. Came up the hill toward the house, and we looked at one another. My wife and I, we knew that if they come up here, we got them this time. We're going to see something, because I think at where we turned the lights off and we're just sitting quietly, they thought we were already in the house, and they weren't being a bit quiet. They were whatever they were talking about. They must have been having a good time, because they just kept on talking. And they moved right in front of us, and they kind of paused there for a minute. And we looked at one another and decided, all right, let's light it up. So we put 2 tactical flashlights on it where we thought we heard it. Didn't see anything. I didn't notice anything. And I'm moving my light to the left, away from where we thought it was. She said, it's right there. And I brought the flashlight back over, and I clearly saw something that, judging by this observation deck down here that was standing next to, the top of its head was about 7.5 foot tall. I saw the side of its face and its shoulder and eye shine. And no more than I settled that light on it, it spun and ran straight over this hill away from us. And it covered a lot of ground quick. It probably ran, I know it covered at least 150, 200 yards in just a few seconds. And I could hear it on the opposite hill behind our house. So we were both kind of shook and we're excited that we saw one. So we split up. She goes to one side of the porch and I go to the other. Because
we could still hear them. We could still hear multiple ones. Movement that hadn't ran. So while I'm focusing, trying to find the one to the left of the house, he's focusing on the ones that you could hear to the right of the house. By that time, he said, "Oh my God, come here." And so I ran to where he was standing. He goes, "There it is. Can you see it?" And I said, at first I said, "No, I don't see anything." He goes, "It's right there. It looks like a stump." And I said, "I still don't see it." About that time, it was laying on the ground. It looked like it had its arms, like it was getting ready to do a push-up, is what it looked like. It was solid black. It raised its head up, and you could see its eyes blink. And its eyes were like a orangish red. And then it put its head down really fast as to, they saw me. That's kind of what we got, is it was trying to keep its head down. So I guess it thought we couldn't see it. About that time, there was kind of a tree behind that area. There was one behind that tree, and it kind of like peeked out. So you could see its head, and you could see its eyes, and it was blinking, and it would pop back in behind the tree. It did this several times.
Yeah. As we sat there focused on the one that was laying on the ground, and we saw these two behind it, that they were, the only way I know how to describe it is like they were kind of weaving. They were kind of bobbing and weaving, peeking out around these trees at us. And the one laying on the ground, it wasn't budging anymore. It's almost as if it knew that, oh, I'm caught. I'm caught right here. And
but you could see its head raise up every so many seconds to see if we still had the flashlight on it. By then, I think the one that was to the left that I heard that was trying to get, at the beginning, I think that it had went around the front of the house to where our buildings were, and you could hear, and it sounded like there was two there. There was one kind of down towards where our path is, going back towards the pond, and there was one up closer to where the other building was. And they started raising Cain. They started slapping the building. They were throwing things.
Tree limbs breaking.
There was tree limbs breaking. And the only thing that I can think of was they are trying to get our attention off of what we're standing here looking at right now. And this went on for maybe a couple of minutes. Neither one of us thought to even look over at the building with the flashlight because we were so focused on the ones that we had right in front of us. And to me, and I don't know if John feels the same way, but to me, the ones that were at the building, it was like they were older because what I was looking at didn't look like a full-grown one. It looked like a person. It looked like it was maybe 6 foot tall, The one behind it looked like it was about 6 or 7 foot tall. The shoulders were not broad. I mean, it looked like the size of a man.
Yeah, the one on the ground was it was my size, and it's when it would raise up and look at us. I almost knew that it was a young one because it looked fluffy. The silhouette and the look of its face, its hair around its head was like fluffy, and so much so that its head was almost looked perfectly round looking at me. And so we're still sitting there trained on it, and these others are just going ballistic off in the woods, but behind our buildings. And Jane told me, said they're trying to distract us. You need to take the light off of it and just let them retreat, let them go back, let them go on about their business. So we did that, and we stayed there and listened, and you can kind of hear there's a little bit of movement, and directly behind where it was laying, there's a pretty deep ravine. I mean, if I go get in the bottom of this thing, you wouldn't see me. But the best we can tell, it was backing up toward that ravine, and we sat there listening, and I lit the area back up, and it was down in that ravine, and it was peeping around a tree at us. And Wes there, I can't even, I'm still getting nervous about it because I can't even describe to you what it felt like with this thing staring at us and blinking, and its eyes looked huge, and we were only 35, 40 yards from this thing. And we finally just killed the light, and we were so excited and kind of awestruck at what happened. And you could just hear them start moving off, and they grouped back up, and they went straight out the ridge line, leaving our yard and stuff. And I was in shock when I saw the one laying on the ground. I passed over it at first as I was scanning the flashlight, and we bought the property, and I've done a bunch of clearing and cleaning up of the woods and stuff around the house and the yard. And
I think we both were in shock because we had a dog bowl out there, was full of water. It was a metal bowl that the dogs drank when they were outside.
I kept kicking it.
He kept kicking it, and it was so loud because the decking is actually concrete, so it would just rattle on the concrete. And he kicked it like 3 times, and neither one of us thought, because we were in such shock, I think, and we just didn't realize. We realized what we were seeing, and we were just in shock. And finally, I was like, "Stop kicking the bowl!" And I bent down and I grabbed the bowl and I put the bowl on the table that was there. It was. I can't even explain the feeling that I had out there. It was a shock and awe, I guess is the best way to describe it. We kind of stood there and looked at one another like, what in the world did we just witness? Did you see what I saw?
We spent 20 minutes on the back porch after they left, asking each other, am I crazy? Did I really just see what I saw? And we were up half the night. We couldn't go to sleep after that. We were so excited about everything. But like I was saying, I mean, if I didn't take a second look at that thing, I wouldn't have even known it was there. When I saw it laying down, I thought it was a log. And then I realized that, I scanned past it and I realized, wait a minute, there's no log there. I mowed that just a few weeks ago. And I brought my light back around, and that's when it peeked up at me for the first time. I saw the eye shine, and then I called her over to where I was. And but it made me really think, what got me was that as much as time as I've spent in the woods, hunting and stuff my whole life. How many times have I walked by one of these things and never would have known?
Yeah, the way this thing was on the ground, it was eerie. It was extremely eerie. But then again, because it didn't look like a person's arms. Like if you were down on the ground and you were getting ready to do a push-up, a person, it didn't look like that. It looked, and the only way that I could say that it looked kind of spiderish.
No,
I don't know if that makes sense.
Like they're doing fingertip push-ups with a real wide stance. Is
Right.
what it looked like.
Right. It was, the arms didn't look natural the way it was holding itself up.
Yeah, it's kind of intriguing that you guys saw the spider crawl, as I call it. I don't know what else to call it. It's a weird movement. For the audience, though, would you kind of describe that movement as far as what you were seeing?
So, you know how when a human comes down and they're laying on their stomach and they put their arms up to do to come up in a push-up, it didn't look like that. It was almost like the arms went out to the side, like a spider would. You know how a spider walks across and its legs kind of goes sideways. And you can tell the back was not coming up at all. It was just the front half with its head coming up. And the way its head came up, it wasn't like the neck, like our neck is kind of long. It swiveled up. I don't know if that makes sense, but it like our neck, you would have to raise like your chest and everything for you to come up to look that way. This didn't do that. Its head just it
was a smooth motion.
Yeah, swiveled back. And I could see a little bit of the features of the face. The light that we had was pretty good. You could see its eyes very well.
You saw the first one's face pretty well.
I saw the first one's face extremely well, and I think that kind of put me in the shock too. The face on it, it was like it had a beard, and around its eyes and around the bottom half of its nose was skin, but the rest of it was hair. And the hair was kind of long. It looked different than the hair of the one laying down on the ground. It wasn't fluffy like the one laying down on the ground. It looked like the hair was longer. And it was so black. The hair was extremely black. I mean, in my mind, I'm trying to describe it, but my mouth won't let me.
The first one looked a little ragged to me. He looked a little shaggy looking.
Yeah, his hair was definitely longer.
Yeah.
Maybe he was older. That's the only thing that I could think of, that he was older than the one that was laying down.
And I want to kind of come back and ask you guys to kind of compare and contrast the faces. But, when either one of these creatures, when you guys were looking at it, and, that one that you're talking about, Jane, and then the one that's on the ground that kind of keeps rolling its head up, did you guys get the impression like I'm looking at a human here? Or did you get the impression of, this is an animal, this is some sort of like non-human primate, like a gorilla or something like that?
Right. Yeah, the first one that I saw, and I got a really good look at it, was more primate. The skin was dark. The nose was flat. The bridge over its eyes was a little heavier. The one that was laying down on the ground, it looked more human than the one that we first initially saw. And it almost had a look of fear laying down there. And I was getting to the point to where, when I told John to take the light off its face, I felt sorry for it. I felt like we had trapped it. And that's when I was, I asked him, I said, just take the light off. It's scared.
The two behind it, when we were holding the light on the one laying down on the ground, and we could scan up a little bit and see the ones behind it moving in and out, there was almost a cooing sound going on right before the others blew up. I mean, it was, and I don't know how to describe that. It was like a light, low cooing sound. It's the only way I know how to describe it. And then it sounded like World War III hit over there behind our buildings. And after that started, I didn't hear any more of the cooing. It was just odd.
John, do you think the little one was cooing?
I think the two that were behind it were cooing. I think they were calling. They were trying to get help.
I gotcha. It is kind of interesting how you guys caught them off guard just by being quiet and, turning off all the lights. They probably had no clue that you guys were there, obviously. When prior to this actually happening, you had mentioned hearing people talking. Did it sound more like humans talking, like some language you couldn't understand, or did it remind you more of, and I won't play them at the moment, but Ron Moorhead and those Sierra sounds? Did it sound more like that?
This sounded, it just sounded like a bunch of garbled talk. I mean, like nonsense speech. It was, and they weren't really being quiet about it.
They wasn't.
I mean, they were just, it sounded like they were having the best conversation ever was as they were walking through the woods, to do whatever it was they were doing. And, it didn't sound like samurai chatter. It didn't sound like, I've listened to all of those sound clips and I couldn't hear anything on there that reminded me of it.
Now, not that night, but, maybe about back in the spring, I have heard like the start of like the samurai on Ron's recording there, how it does that real deep samurai talk. I have heard that several times, but it's cut short. Like it'll start and then it'll stop. But it was different that night. It almost sounded like they were talking, but they had their hand over their mouth.
Yeah.
It was a mumble, muffled mumble, and it was like that the night that I heard them talking the night before. It was the same way. It was deep. You could tell that there was words, but you couldn't understand it, and you really couldn't hear it. Like it wasn't, like it's not audible. It was almost like it wasn't audible for us. It was so low and so deep. That's the only way I could describe it.
Can I ask you guys, it's kind of fascinating that the young ones held back while the adults were the ones in front. I know that you guys don't know, and I don't know, but what do you think they were doing?
I think they were hunting. I think they were just hunting. And, I mean, this, where we are is covered up with wildlife. There's anything you want here. And, I think they were just, they were getting ready to go out on a hunt and, let's go check in on the humans kind of thing. But other than that, I have no idea what they were doing. I mean, we've got chickens and stuff like that, and nothing's ever been bothered. And, so I think there's enough stuff here to support them.
There's tons of deer here, a lot of deer, and it's odd because we've been here almost 4 years, and the first 2.5 years. We've never heard them together. We've heard whistles and we've heard like whoops, but it's always been like maybe one or two, not that many together. And then, all of a sudden last year there was multiple ones, and that's the first time we've ever heard them like that together. So I don't know if they're just passing through our area to get to where they hunt, or if
or if they've always been here. We just didn't.
Yeah, we've just never heard it. We've never really sat outside. Maybe, the first year on our porch until we got it. We redid the house. So, we started sitting out, on the back porch the last probably 2 years, wouldn't think.
Yeah.
So I just don't know if we just didn't pay attention.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about that. I mean, you guys had bought this home 3 or 4 years ago, and within the last 2 years, this activity started kind of leading up to you guys seeing the creatures. Do you notice, kind of looking back now, some of the weird stuff, whether it be the rock throwing or the vocalizations, or because I know your sighting was, around this time last year, kind of leading up into September. But is there certain times of the year you guys notice there's more activity, or is it just something that is ongoing?
It seems like they're we notice more activity from September to about March or April.
Mm-hmm.
But all throughout the year at random times, we'll hear whoops and weirdness going on. But nothing like we did that night.
Yeah, it's been mainly, it seems like they come through here in the fall, and then we hear them, we'll be hearing the whistles and the whoops in the spring. And I've tried so many times to capture it, like the sound on recording, on my phone. I've tried on the Ring camera.
And we ordered a digital recorder.
Yeah.
And we got game ears.
And we never have heard anything. And it's weird because I was working from home at the time. So I was home all the time. And I would take the garbage out or whatever, and you would hear a whistle from front of the house, and you'd hear a whistle from the back of the house. Or sometimes you would hear a whoop from one side of the house and then a whoop on the other side of the house. And I actually took out the garbage one day, and the garbage can was empty, and it was extremely loud when I put it in there. And it actually scared me when I did it, because it was loud. As soon as that trash can, or as soon as that trash bag hit that trash can and the lid come down, in the backyard, there was a loud whoop. And that's the one that I sent you on the Ring camera. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hope the Ring camera picked it up. And I stood there and I kept moving in front of the camera to keep it active. Kind of on down, maybe about 30 yards, 40 yards on over, kind of on the side of the chicken coop. There was another one, and this was different. They sounded a little different. One sounded a little deeper, and the other one sounded not so deep. And it did it several times out there. And I was standing there, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I was praying. I was like, please, 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 please let the camera pick it up. And came in and looked at it, and sure enough, it did. And I was so excited. He was at work, and I sent it to him, directly. I was like, "You got to listen to this."
I pulled it up on my computer.
We have trail cameras out in different areas throughout the property, just looking for deer. Because during deer season, you're trying to figure out what their pattern is coming in and out, and when they're coming. So you'll know what time to be out there.
We just want to see what's moving too.
Yeah.
We've had bear, bobcat, and big cats. We've had a big cat move through here. And we blanketed the place with trail cameras and could never get a picture of anything on the trail camera. While I was being strategic about where I put my cameras and what they're looking at, I kept having, there was one area, and it's a remote leach field for our septic system. So it's a good size open, maybe a third of an acre, and keep it mowed real well and everything. It's off in the woods by itself. And it's a good spot, you're allowed to bait here in North Carolina for deer. So I keep some corn out there and stuff, and, hoping to get a glimpse of something in that field. And saw all kinds of deer and all kinds of animals. So I know there's a lot of animal activity out there, but could never get it. All of a sudden, my trail camera would glitch out. I'd go pull the SIMS card out of it, and I'd be checking And the last few pictures that the camera would have taken, the pictures would be a real bright pink hue, and you couldn't make anything out. And this would be a daytime shot from the timestamp on the camera. And then, of course, the batteries are dead. So I put brand new batteries in it, and fresh SIMS card, and a few days later, go back and check it, and it's the same thing. I get pictures of deer and squirrels and rabbits and foxes and everything. And then all of a sudden, I'd run into a string of pink pictures, and the batteries would be dead again. So I don't know what that's about or why that would happen.
And he even tried, we thought maybe it was the camera was messed up. So we put a different camera out there, and it would do the same thing.
A lot of eyewitnesses will report electronics failing, and a lot of researchers too. When these things are in the area, their game cams will shut off, or the batteries just magically will die. The light, that pink thing you're talking about, was it like a light, John?
No, it's almost like. Have you ever seen a trail camera when it's dusky? When it's right at dusk and it doesn't know if it's daytime or nighttime, and that's the only time I've ever seen one do that before. But it's like I would get 6 or 7 pictures in a row like that across a period of day that's not dusky. It'd be 2:00 in the afternoon, and I get that.
Yeah. And most of the time, there would be like a deer actually out there around that same time on the camera, and then the next picture would be that pink wispy.
It's weird looking.
Yeah, it's weird looking pink wispy pictures, and then it would go back around the same time. The pictures would be perfect again. And then it wouldn't pick up anymore because the batteries were dead. And we switched the cameras out multiple times, thinking it was the cameras, and it was not the camera.
One time I had a dozen cameras out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird about the game cam. Like I said, it gets reported, though. There's people who have these things on their property and kind of report the same thing you did, John. The pink kind of streaking you're seeing, most of the time the cameras are just turned off or they die from the battery. That is very, very strange. On this property, have you guys seen the lights by chance?
So I hadn't really noticed a lot of that until the night that Jane killed her first deer, and we walked back up to the house and got her 4-wheeler and a little trailer, and we're going down to get the deer. And my son was here. And I let him know what we were doing and where we were going. And it's probably, through the trail to where we had to go get the deer, it's probably a half mile down there, I'd say. And so we're riding down there, and it's getting dark at this time. And we field dress the deer and get it in the trailer, and we're coming back up. And as we're driving back up, our son's on the back porch, and he's watching us come out of the woods. And I hang the deer up in our building, and after washing it out a little bit, and he says, as I come in the house, my son looks at me and says, Did you see that behind you all when you were driving up on the 4-wheeler? And I said, no, what are you talking about? He said, there was a ball of light following you out of the woods. I was kind of shocked by it because I've never really thought about it up until that point. And so then it kind of raised my awareness, and I try to just keep an eye out for stuff now. And it was about a week later when we had the sighting on our backyard. It was about a week after she killed her first deer, and ever since that, we see stuff here and there. It's like a blue flash almost outside when there's no storms, there's no lightning, a clear blue sky day, and you'll be sitting here watching television, and you all of a sudden glance out the window and there's be a flash of blue light. And then it's not been 3 weeks ago we were sitting here, and I don't know why. I turned and looked at the front door. I thought I'd heard something. And I'm looking at the front door of our home, and through the glass of the front door, I see a blue light about the size of a baseball. And it just kind of went across the window. And, it kind of made me pause for a second. I look down and my dog sees it. He's looking at the same thing I am. And it's daylight outside. It's not nighttime, it's daytime. And I see this. And he, the dog and I look at one another like, did you see that? And we kind of walk over and we're looking out the windows and don't see anything else, And
yeah, and you could be sitting here watching television, and we have big windows that go all the way across the living room, and then French doors, and then more windows that are in like a breakfast dining room. And you can be sitting here watching television, and all of a sudden you'll see, and they're all different colors. I've seen green ones, I've seen orange ones, I've seen blue ones. And they rise from where the woods are, and they kind of go up in the tree, and you can sit there and out of the corner of your eye, and you're like, oh, and they're there. It's like about the size of a tennis ball. Sometimes they're smaller. It's almost like they're trying to get our attention. I've seen them in every window in the back. Sometimes it's a flash. Sometimes they just sit there and hover. We see those a lot, and it's only during the time when we hear the whistles when we walk outside, or when we hear the whoops when we walk outside. It's only during that time that we see it. I haven't seen any in the back for a while. The first ones that we've seen was the front door like 3 weeks ago, like he was talking about. That's the first one that we've seen so far going into the fall, I guess, since the spring. And
jokingly, I turned to her and told her what I'd seen. And I said, well, they must be back. We just kind of laughed it off.
But, it's kind of changed my perspective. I've never been scared. I'll go, as long as I have a gun, I'll walk all the way back on our property. Now I second guess it. I'm even leery about being out in my yard to even walk out there to mow or do anything in the flower beds. I'm very hesitant, and I've caught myself not doing it any longer ever since what we saw in the backyard. I stay right by the doors when I am outside. And basically it's just sitting, in the rocking chairs out front, or, sitting on our patio set in the back. I don't venture out in the yard any longer.
Who could blame you for what you guys have witnessed on that property? And, many years ago, I would start talking to people who had these things on their property, and they would always kind of end the conversation with, oh, and by the way, I'm also seeing these weird lights. And when I first started getting them, I was like, I don't know what that is. But what's weird is you hear these lights being reported more often than not. What's your take, Jane? Well, what do you think that these lights are?
I don't really know. The only thing that I feel like when I see them is, hey, we're out here, why aren't you out here? That's kind of what I feel when I see them. I know it's not, I think it's, I can't explain it. I don't know. I cannot explain it. I feel like it is something. I don't feel like it's like extraterrestrial or anything like that. I feel like it's something tied with what we saw that night. I don't know if it's them traveling here or, getting to where they need to go, or if that's how they are when they're not in a form. I honestly, I don't know. All I know is I know what I see it when I see it, and I know that it's a ball of light, and that's it. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, and that's kind of the weird part about the lights, because like on people's property, they'll report, everything from red to orange to white to blue. And you're right, they do come in different colors. I've seen the lights, 2 of them. One was blue, one was kind of an orange, yellowish color. And I didn't know what they were. But it's odd that they show up so consistently when people have these things on their property. It makes me wonder. I mean, this is kind of a weird coincidence that keeps happening over and over and over again. Are they related? What do you think, John?
I think they're 100% related, but personally, I don't think they're traveling through a portal to get here. I might be wrong about that. We may find out one of these days, but what I saw, to me, I think that they're an ancient being that have always been here, and in that, I think that they may know more about our natural world than we know, and if that's a means of them communicating or whatever, if they use that for a means of seeing in another area or something, I don't know. But when we've seen them, I know that it's a direct correlation. If I'm sitting in the house and I see one and I walk outside, I know that I'm gonna hear something. You can write it down. You can just know that that's going to happen. The property's been here for over 30 years, and the fellow that developed it was an outdoorsman. It's interesting to me that I don't know if this place sat empty before we purchased it for a while. It almost looked like it had, because we did a ton of work on the place. I think they've always been here, or they've moved through here a lot, and they if they're out there all the time, they've noticed the activity of us on the property, because we made a lot of major changes outside too. There's been we've got a real nice trail that goes down to get down to the pond, and you want to ride a 4-wheeler to get down there, it's too far to walk, and it's nothing to walk out there, and there'll be a 3-inch diameter tree across it that didn't come from there. And I'm a pretty practical kind of guy. I mean, if somebody's trying to fence you off or keep you from going somewhere, or they're going to let you know that, hey, I'm here, kind of thing. And but from the perspective of the lights, I'll get back to that. I know 100% that they're related, but I can't explain what they're using it for, other than trying to get our attention. That's the only thing I could think of that they would be, if they have the ability to do that, they're trying to get our attention.
Kind of an interesting take on the lights, because, when you see the lights, at least for me, you feel like you're being watched, and you feel like it's something intelligent, and why they would be around when these creatures are around. It does make you wonder. And I was going to ask you what you thought Sasquatch is, and I'll ask Jane here in a minute, but going back to what you were saying with regard to what Sasquatch is, John, do you think it's more in our family tree, or do you think it's more like a non-human primate, or do you think it's just something completely separate?
I think they could be I think they could be something completely different. I think that they're their own species, and they've been here, and they've got their own tree with its own branches, if that makes sense. And there's species that branch off on parallel paths. And I almost think that, that primates went in one direction, we went in another, and this thing went its own path, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a fair answer, John. It is hard to really put them in a category, but I appreciate your feedback. What about yourself, Jane? What do you think that these things are? Because you went from being pretty skeptical, thinking the whole thing is kind of nonsense, and not only seeing one, but you've seen a few of them, and you're having all this stuff happen. I mean, it's become a reality for you living there. What do you think that they are?
I think that it's something. I think they are something that's kind of always been here. What I saw was a full-blooded being of some kind. I kind of feel like maybe, and I know this probably sounds weird, that maybe they don't stay here all the time. I think maybe they come and go. And that might be what the ball of light that we see is, them coming, coming and then taking shape. But other than that, I don't know. I know that what was standing out there was actually standing out there. And it wasn't human, but it wasn't an ape or a primate, but it was something, and I can't explain it. I've read the Bible, and I've heard of people talking about the Watchers. They're an ancient race that's here, and they're still here. And I kind of feel in another way that might be what that is. Sometimes I feel scared that they're out there. There's been times that I've been out at the building getting ready to mow, that something has come over me, an intuition that has come over me, or something that has literally forced me. It was all I could do to run to the house, and it's a pretty good distance. All I could do to get to the house, to get inside, because I felt like there was something there. There was something behind me. It made me nauseous. It gave me an extreme headache. And this has happened to me twice. And then there's times I go out there and it's fine. So I don't know if there's something that's, one of them is coming through that might not be happy that I'm out there. Sometimes I feel, like they're there and they're watching, but that's okay. They're staying on their part and we're staying on ours. So it depends. Like I said, there's been twice that's happened to me. And I don't venture out too far out of the yard anymore. I just don't feel comfortable. And when I am out there, I always have a pistol. I always have my 9mm with me, regardless.
Yeah, like I said earlier, who could blame you? I wouldn't walk the property unless I was armed to the teeth as well. Kind of a last question I want to ask you guys. The previous homeowner, do you think that he knew they were on the property, or have you guys given that any sort of thought?
My gut tells me that he did. There's a real nice observation deck built behind the home, and we were told by him that they built that so that they could watch the herons nesting in the pond. And but knowing what I know now, like since day one we've been here, we've heard things leading up to what happened last fall. I don't know how he couldn't have known that they were here, or known that something was weird. I mean,
especially, blocking off property, to kind of save he says he's saving the trees. And so it makes me
little nature preserves.
Yeah. It makes me wonder. Yeah. It makes me wonder if that is what he was protecting. We've talked to him several times. He's always told us that there's bear and stuff out here, and he's been explicit saying when you go outside,
have a weapon,
and he's always made it to where because there's bear, So I don't know if he was telling us that to kind of make us have a weapon because of that, because of what we saw outside, or we do have bear, or if it, was for bear. But he did warn us when we first purchased the place that to have a weapon when we went outside.
If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. I will see everyone after the holidays. Wishing you a wonderful Christmas and a bright new year ahead.